Grok just in the last couple days released its API for developers.
The one piece here is that they increased price.
That was an interesting play. Also interesting because New York Times is suing them currently.
Aloha, everyone, and welcome to the Daily AI Show. Today is Wednesday, and that means it's News Day. So thank you for joining us today as we cover the latest, greatest, and hopefully most intriguing news to each of us from around the world. I'm Jyunmi, and I'm here with Brian, Andy, Karl, and Beth. So, a lot of news. We had an eventive last night, and so but we're going to talk about AI today, and maybe we'll touch on a few other subjects. Now, as per usual, we didn't really share what news we're going to talk about, so it'll be new for us as well. All right. Andy, did you want to start us off with your most pressing news?
Yeah, so I think that the landscape for competition in the development of AI models globally has had an empowerment as a result of the election of Donald Trump, alongside Elon Musk's influence and involvement with that new administration. As you probably know, AI from Elon Musk's company, XAI, is, in favor of what he calls an anti-woke principle over guardrails that would otherwise limit hate speech, bullying, and misinformation. He's a very big free speech advocate in that respect. And then you have a couple of other factors. The Republicans have long embraced laissez-faire regulation of industries, and so there will be less inclination, especially with the Senate now being in control of the Republicans along with the presidency. There will be fewer regulations on AI, and so I think that it's an open, competitive field now, especially in our competition with China when it comes to AI. And there's some news about Tencent and the release of their new open source model that we'll talk about on this show. But I think that's an important thing to take away from the election last night.
Yeah, 100%. I think, there's probably a whole other show on Elon Musk, and not from a political standpoint, like you're saying, Andy, but just, if you go back and what he's been trying to do with XAI, obviously he's rapidly building and deploying some of the largest data centers on the planet. If not, he already has done it. I know he was doubling what he already had. And also, this is a guy who, we don't know what his motives were, but not too long ago was saying, hey, everybody should press the pause button. I'm one of the people that says everybody should pause on AI. I am of the impression, again, not political at all. We'll have to see what happens in this next iteration of a Trump presidency, and what role he truly plays. But it's interesting that this is somebody who was saying, hey, everybody pump the brakes. I personally think that was so that he could get a competitive advantage and run faster than everybody else. And that didn't really play out that way. But it'll be really interesting. And then, of course, the whole connection between what Elon Musk might do in a Trump presidency and how Tesla parts and pieces fit into that, and government contracts and SpaceX. And there's a lot there, so it's really interesting to see what happens in AI. Go ahead.
So, Brian, the one thing that I still can't get to me, and Jyunmi, this is for you as well, how that man can be ranked in the top 20 of Diablo players while running Tesla, SpaceX, Twitter X, and now going to be potentially in a White House. I was like, dude, when do you have time? Because, okay, kind of going off of it, that takes a long time to grind to get to where Elon is on the Diablo. Like, that's like, he's only one of 2 Americans on there, and you've got to play hundreds of hours to get to that level. So I was like,
AI is playing.
So,
Since we're a show about AI, perhaps there's an AI that's part of that.
I can't understand that part. So yeah, that was literally my take on the entire, like, how does this man have any time to do all of this? Be CEO of 3 companies. The only thing that I would say though is, like, they had those memes and stuff about joining the administration. My thing is all those regulations against him. But what happens? Isn't there some sort of conflict of interest for a private person going into government? Wouldn't he have to extract himself from his companies, or that doesn't matter anymore?
So this is a Trump presidency.
That's
So that we will see. Let's just leave it there. We'll see what the new administration says in terms of that. But in terms of AI and Elon and X, Grok just in the last couple days released its API for developers, and there are $25 in credits for every month for the next 2 months, right? So you can go in to play with it, and you can see what Grok is like when you're able to control some of the features, some of the settings, right? So that is definitely an Elon XAI story. We're having nothing to do with the election. So that's one of mine.
The one piece that I do wanna from right now, I think in the United States, you all may know it better than I do. What exactly was, I never followed this that much, was what was Biden's, like, did his executive order actually do? Like, what far reaching, or was it just a bunch of guidelines? I'm not sure what that means. Like, what was it? And they've obviously said they're going to repeal that. So
Yeah, it wasn't like strict rules and regulations. There was no regulatory effect of it, but they were executive order guidelines that basically informed everyone who was developing AI that you would need to meet certain requirements in order to continue. It was weak in that respect, but it was at least in the right direction for those interested in maintaining control over AI.
I want to, if before we sort of move on from anything that's election related or whatever, I do want to just call out that Perplexity. Actually, they were in the news a couple of times. Somebody else may be able to talk about their New York Times.
yes.
Somebody else could talk about that one. That one's interesting too. However, what I was going to talk about is that Perplexity put out, what do they call that? Their election information hub for informed voting, which is not a bad title, honestly. And right before the show, Andy and I just mentioned that we both had used it at various times. There's sort of 2 sides to it. There's the help me understand who my candidates are side of things. And I was just saying that I kind of felt like that was maybe a little late in the game, just because there's so many places that do early voting. I had voted well over a week ago. And so I was using other resources like Ballotopia. I actually would have liked to be able to use, not solely, I think you got to diversify, but I definitely would have been playing around with Perplexity to see how it compares and contrasts. However, the other side of it was sort of the election hub. Very, very easy user interface. Certainly not the only ones that have something like this, but easy to see the electoral map, easy to see what was going on in terms of Senate and House and different areas there as far as governors. So really, really sort of interesting. I thought, oh, this is actually like, I like seeing that Perplexity was part of that, as trying to be part of a news source in that way, or a trusted source in that way. And I thought it's interesting because, is this indicative of Perplexity doing more like this? I mean, obviously high stakes with elections, but are in other words, are they trying to bridge the gap? Or maybe it's just a marketing play to say, hey, Perplexity and our AI search are trusted. And that's a big leap. I mean, they're certainly not AP or Reuters or whatever, right? So where do they fit into that? Where will people trust a platform that is inherently an AI platform? how much human is in the loop in it. I think it actually just brings up a lot of cool questions about where Perplexity sees themselves as part of this larger future of how we get information and how validated or how verified it is, how down the middle it is when it comes to obviously politics and stuff like that. So thought it was really cool. Used it several times last night for quick updates and things like that. And I thought they did a good job. I would have just liked to have seen it like 4 months ago and build up from there, because I think it actually would have been more valuable. But kudos to them for putting it out there and being part of the conversation.
Yeah, you bring up some great points, Brian, because that is a larger conversation about how to build the trust, credibility, and authenticity or authority in whatever subject. And I think that's a thing that might just come over with time. But yes, I seem to always enjoy something new that's coming from Perplexity. Karl, I wanted to know if you had a particular story that you wanted to touch upon.
Well, just to go, connect to the Perplexity thing, which I thought was, to me, from outside of the election coverage, I think that was one of the biggest news pieces, was that I don't think Aravind was trying to be, I think he was really honestly being helpful, but just the way that it came across. So what happened was the New York Times publisher A.G. Sulzberger emails the Times newsroom saying that the tech guild strike will continue through the election. He says it's troubling that tech will, and then so what Aravind actually tweeted out was, sorry to see this, Perplexity is on standby to ensure your essential coverage is available to all throughout the election. DM me anytime here. I think he was just trying to be helpful, but that definitely came across as, oh, striking workers, don't need them. You now have AI to help you out, right? So I think the perception, the optics of that wasn't well received, and there's quite a bit of backlash from that. I don't think he was trying to position it that way, but it really came across.
Is this the case where PR should have been more involved in a CEO's social media? Because look, speaking of Trump, he was the first president who was, on his first term, where he was like, yeah, I'll be damned if you're taking away my Twitter access. Yeah. It was not something he was willing to relinquish, because he wanted that direct link to the people, whatever it was. So anyway, the reason I say that though is that obviously that can go the other way. There's tons of times where, there was PR where there's probably thinking, oh man, we would have loved to have had that 30 seconds before it went live. And this is one of those cases, I agree with you, Karl, where that was an interesting play. Also interesting because New York Times is suing them currently. So you're the CEO, you're getting sued by New York Times. Now, New York Times has run this play with OpenAI and has gotten a deal out of it, I believe. They have a content deal. So I think that's why they start this litigation. It's not, I think other people have said this on the show, it's probably not to necessarily win the litigation, but to secure a content rights deal out of the back end of that. And then Perplexity. So you have that going on. Then he shoots off this text, and yes, why would you want to be associated with anybody calling you a scab? Like, that's a big deal when you're talking about unions and things like that. I mean, I'm sure not just the US, but I thought that was a misstep for sure, because he could have been more clear about it. And even if you're right, Karl, like, he was just trying to come across as helpful, but it also came across as like, is he being coy? Is he being sarcastic? Like, it was really hard to read what his intention was for that. And he had to walk it back a little bit and say, oh, I was generally trying to be helpful. But man, that's kind of a misstep for him.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've said on previous shows about Perplexity is how accessible and responsive they are, right? So the good news is that they're really accessible and responsive. The bad news is they're really accessible and responsive, right? Like, it's just one of those things. Like, it's two sides of the coin.
And that's like super damning, I don't think, to Perplexity. It's just, it was a misstep, I guess, is the way I saw it. So, but not like, business damning, or anything like that. It's just interesting.
And speaking to your PR point, I I mean, this could be a great use case for why you want an AI avatar CEO. Then you can make them say whatever you want properly. That's what I mean.
Or the other side of that, why you might want to have a custom GPT-ish, Claude project that is a PR AI. And before you send your stuff out, you have a quick automation because it's so easy to automate posts. But let's say the company says, look, at a bare minimum, when you send out this tweet, this whatever, it has to go through the automation and it's going to check to see if maybe what you said could be construed differently than whatever your intent was. And then it approves it going out the door. So you could also use AI for the actual PR portion of it. But you're right. Jimmy, you could also flip it and say, oh, well, actually, better to have the AI saying these things than a human. So, which still doesn't make it super fun either, right?
And you certainly don't want like everything to get bland, because that could be the result, something that would be a predictable result of this. But at least, like, are we currently in like litigation with the topic? Like, maybe don't do that one.
Yeah, maybe.
Right. Was that a lawyer call after that? Did the lawyers call up? It's like, hey,
Yeah, right. Yeah. Who was the first person that reached out to the CEO on that one?
right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, to shift gears a little bit, I mean, we've talked about AI in government, so I'll drop my little government-related one. Meta is going to allow U.S. government agencies and contractors to start using Llama AI, their open source Llama AI model. They hope it will be used for streamlining logistics, planning, strengthening cyber defenses, things like that. But they're working with Amazon, Microsoft, IBM, Lockheed Martin, and Oracle, and a bunch of others. So this is, I find it interesting because it's an open source integration model as opposed to a proprietary model, such as like GPT-4 or something like that. So there's a little more eyeballs on how it will be implemented and things like that. And it seems to be in a little bit of conflict of part of their usage agreement so far says you can't use it for military use and things like that. So I don't know how, if they're rewriting their agreement, or if they found a particular use loophole or something like that. But it is interesting to see open source use of these AI models in larger applications like military applications, because usually that's very proprietary, locked down. There's security stuff. I mean, up until about 20 years ago, they were still using Windows NT on some of the defense systems and things like that. So I found that a little interesting that they're moving into that space. Does anybody have another pressing story that they're really itching to talk about?
I do, because I think this one is very interesting. So Claude 3.5 Haiku was released, was it yesterday? I believe it was yesterday or the day before. Anyway, the one piece here is that they increased price of it.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of people that were commenting on that. So I'm curious, because most of the models, the prices have decreased. Like, a lot of people have been saying, the price of intelligence is going to go down to nearly zero. And we've seen price cut to pretty much every single model. I'm not sure. Is this the first time we've seen a model price increase?
I think so. I mean, at least as it did give it
Context, you have to put it in context of the pricing across the full spectrum of Anthropic's models. What they said in increasing the price is that small model now outperforms Opus, Claude 3 Opus. So 3.5 Haiku, this tiny model, which was really, really very, very inexpensive. They raised the price so that now Opus is 15 times more expensive, even though it doesn't do as well as the new price of the Haiku model. I think it's a smart move it just corrects probably a mispricing of Haiku once it got so good that it was better than their largest model.
And we should point out that it's a 4x hike. I mean, I'm looking at it on the screen here. It went 3.5 Haiku. So it isn't new model. It's a version of the new model of Haiku. Is $1 per million input tokens, which is roughly 750,000 words. It used to be 25 cents per million input, and it's $5 per million output tokens, and it used to be $1.25 per million output tokens. So all total, that's a 4x increase. So I agree with everybody. Like, you don't see this that often. It's maybe just a readjustment, to your point, Andy, based on how powerful this smaller model is, Haiku has. But that's a drastic increase. I mean, we don't usually see a 4x increase on a same named model, but yeah.
No, the pricing at $1, per million was, or around there, was sort of your teaser kind of promo price. Like, get it your first zillion tokens free, pretty much, in order to improve the adoption rate of Haiku. But now that Haiku is so powerful, they're just raising it to a very reasonable price. It's not going to cost you a lot of money to use Haiku.
Right. And typically the way people use Haiku is that you are using 3.5 Sonnet to get the majority of what you're doing. And then you're like offloading to Haiku. And offloading to Haiku in this context is very likely we would be happy to pay slightly more for a better offloading ramp, right? Than only the stuff that can be handled by Haiku. Which is much more like solely pattern based. Like, we're not expecting you to understand any of the words that we use in the prompt, because that's not what you were designed for. So.
Gotcha. I do want to,
right.
If I can, it's kind of a news story here, and I actually want to put ripped from the headlines, as they used to say on one of those shows. But in our case, it's going to be ripped from the comments, because Justin had said, he was referring back to Gwyn. Well, so let me start there, I guess. Gwyn was saying, so far I'm pulling from Perplexity, Claude, and ChatGPT to get the best info. And Gwyn was saying before that, that she's been finding Claude more helpful in my strategy building than ChatGPT. It seems more direct, comes up with strategy versus what I can look into. And then, as I said, Justin said, Gwyn, Perplexity, Claude, and ChatGPT, the AI Trinity. And I do want to at least talk about that, because one of the things that happened, I think on Halloween, the 31st last week, so Thursday, was that we basically, I think, Karl, you had brought this to my attention first, which now we have desktop apps for Claude, Perplexity, and ChatGPT. And with those come some additional features, functionality, a little bit here and there. Beth, you mentioned that it was interesting that Claude, or Anthropic, had released it both on Mac and Windows on the same day, versus ChatGPT is still like a lighter beta version on the Windows side of it. So the reason I want to bring this up is,
Go ahead. I was just going to say really quick, I found out yesterday, because I was using it, the Windows version of ChatGPT did add advanced voice. So you can start using that on the desktop.
yeah. So my point to bring it's not even that it's like, it is news, because it did happen in the last 7 days, at least the Claude side of it. And, just it triggered me when Justin said, like the AI Trinity, but there is actually a lot to be said to that. And I joked in our newsletter on Sunday that, like, hey, now you have 3 less tabs to keep open. Now you only have 57 tabs open instead of 60, right? And there is something to be said for that. You think of, like, I'm a huge music buff, so having a Spotify, I use the desktop app all the time. I don't do it in a tab, right? And there's other applications that are like that as well. So it is kind of the AI Trinity. I also happen to be teaching a 6-week course. Today is my 4th week of it. And today specifically, I'll be training on Claude. Last week, we talked all about Perplexity. The first 2 weeks, we talked about ChatGPT. But in the last 2 weeks, so I got to get through Claude today, next Wednesday and the Wednesday beyond that, since everything is sales related based on my job, we'll actually be talking a lot about, kind of to your point, Justin, about where do these tools blend? Gwen was saying, oh, Claude I find it better in this case, and this case. Oh, ChatGPT is actually really good here. Oh, Perplexity is different. And I also have a pro. I can maybe flip up the models and it does a different thing for me. And I like it for this, this, and this. And so one of the things I like to talk to people, I'm talking specifically to sales, but it's an interesting use case, which is when is the right use of each tool based on whatever the problem or task that you're trying to solve for. And I think personally, just having those as desktop apps now actually makes that a little bit easier to bounce back and forth and say, oh, I'm going to start here. But I really like the way Sonnet 3.5 writes. So I'm going to finish it here, but I'm going to get all my notes and everything because I have internet access over on Perplexity. So I might have a very quick 3 to 5 minute process where I start on Perplexity, I clean it up in ChatGPT, and I write with Claude. That's a very normal use case. And so anyway, it's sort of just talking about having like the news being the apps, but this idea of this Trinity and using all three of them almost like not interchangeably, but where they fit best for your particular use case. I think we're going to see more and more of that. Maybe agents and things will sort of blend that out down the road, and we won't really think about it as individual tools anymore. But I mean, I certainly do now.
And just to bring in more of the discussion of the chat, I think we're going to need to expand beyond Trinity. Maybe we now have a quad, a quartet, because Notebook LM is being nominated for that fourth slot, and we agree. Several of us are also using.
And once you go multimodal, then you got to get into Flux and all. You can go and go and go with it as well. But yeah, as far as you're right. It's not really a Trinity, but like depending on what you're trying to get out of it, I guess.
It would be really nice if someone would just create a great UI, UX interface where you could plug in all of these models with your accounts and then just talk to it and it would go use the right one for the right job, and you just need one desktop app and then you could get rid of more tabs. I mean, that would be awesome.
For someone trying to be right, and
that's Typing Mind, but it's not a desktop app.
Trying to solve for that pain point,
Well, no, all my like shortcuts, I have to remember all these shortcuts, right? Because like each one of them, I was like, okay, which shortcut do I want for voice? Which one do I want to do Claude? Which one do I want to do Perplexity? And if you're a designer, there's Canva, right? So I was like, if you can remember that, makes it easier, because I really, really enjoy Claude's ability now to view visuals inside a PDF. It's actually really, really good. If you actually go into a PDF, say page 27, describe this image, this image, this image, or ask this, it does a really good job of it. So I don't know if anyone has tried that, but what's nice about that is they've put it in the API. So we put it in some of the digital assistants we built, and it's pretty good because that was the issue. But yeah, but having all three of these desktop apps, it's just a pain to have them, to 4 of them, 5 of them. If I'm sure Grok, will have something. It just makes, because all of them are following the same kind of model. I can only imagine that's going to happen. And then Google, I think there's the Google app already that you can use, but I would imagine, wouldn't they want to separate that out?
Well, this is where like your computer being able to see itself, right? Yeah. So Anthropic's computer use looks like rumors are saying Siri is going to come out with the function to one of the new updates. I guess actually it's an update for the devs. They're now given access to Siri's intents to be able to see your screen, right? Because then what you're going to say is you don't care what the shortcut was, right? Like, hey, Cord 10 Alexi Goo, please open, like I want to do this in this program. And then it's not going to need to know, you don't need to remember the shortcuts and the system is just going to know.
So really quick, I want to bring up Cisco's comment. Cisco says there is an aggregator, and it's called ChatHub. All right, Cisco. I'm going to take a look at that, and we'll see what's going on. And you say there's 6 at a time. All right, perfect. We'll plug in 6 different models, and we'll see what happens. Thank you for the suggestion. And if it is fantastic, maybe we'll do a whole show on it. I don't know. But I did want to change up the news a little bit, and something in the happy AI space, or at least makes me smile, is let's talk about whales. So a couple months ago, there was a little story where they had built AI models to start trying to translate whale language, I guess. Whaleese? Okay. We'll move on. So trying to train AI using various data to translate that whale song. That's the one. It's called Song. But now, on top of that, Project SETI, Cetacean Translation Initiative, what they're trying to do is they're using drones, essentially, with their AI models to and VHF, very high frequency signal sensors, to determine where whales will be essentially breaching, like where they're coming to surface and things like that. And that's apparently the hardest part, to get the other sensors and the other recording devices onto whales, is to find out when they're going to go take a breath, because they can stay underwater for a very long time, and they travel, thousands of miles in their migration patterns. So it's fun to see that AI is going to allow us to talk to whales and track the whales and just see, just have happy fun times with our whale friends. So I thought that was a nice lighter bit of news. I did have a sort of sci-fi almost story that I also wanted to touch upon. And apparently, the University of California, San Diego, right? Do I have the right one? Yes. They came up with an ultrasound-based muscle monitoring system. You basically slap on a patch, and it's able to do high-resolution ultrasound images of your muscles, right? So this initially was developed for respiratory illnesses and monitoring, and just trying to monitor what possible respiratory illnesses and treatments and things like that. But they were also able to put it on hands and forearms and get like 13 degrees of articulation freedom, 10 finger joints, 3 rotation angles. So they were able to use that to connect it to a robot arm, so that the robot arm could, manipulate things and pour water into a beaker and those kinds of things, and those fine motor movements. And so they have their algorithm, their AI that reads all of those different movements. Now, this is just something that they attach to the skin. So the next step, I think, is more embodied, right? So you can control the robot. And does it have to be a robot? Perhaps it could be an exoframe. I see a smile from Karl. You know where the you know where this is going, Karl. All right. Okay. So if you're a fan of the mecha genre, right? You're pilots in robots, Pacific Rim, robot jocks, you can I'm thinking even Sigourney Weaver from Aliens, in that big exosuit, and you're just controlling it with your own movement. It's just going to be like Pacific Rim, where you're doing kung fu in your room, and it's moving a robot fighting kaiju. Just saying. I think that would be fun.
If I have to do that, I guess that's partially being able to take up my recycling, if I have to sit in my room and kind of pretend to walk, I guess that's halfway there. But please, can you I just literally just want it to do it by itself.
Yeah.
I don't want to move and pretend to do it, because that kind of still is the same thing. Because I was like, well, I guess I can kind of walk in my room pretending to go up, but that doesn't make any sense. Why would I do this?
Well, you bring up a good point, but there's the connector right there. If the AI can translate your muscle movements, right, and that can translate into data, and if you combine it with MIT's newest research, which they're calling heterogeneous pre-trained transformers, that gather different models, multimodal models, to help train robots, embodied AI, then everyone could just wear a suit or a bunch of patches, go through the motions, right? And that would inform how the robot should be.
Okay. So one more thing.
Just saying.
I have to take out the recycling. Now, instead of taking it out, I have to put on a suit and pretend to take.
I'm just saying for training, that's at all. You do it once, and then your robot can do it.
Oh, it remembers
Yeah.
to do the exact.
You create the training data of how all of those movements are created, and then that's translated to training the robot. And once you've trained it, anyone can train it. And then now the robot has it, That means they'll be able to move like people. You won't have to like pre-program everything like that. It's like, oh yeah, humans move their hands like this when they want to like dump the recycling. Right?
Okay.
Well,
Clearly coming to a sci-fi AI show near you.
yeah.
Sometimes.
Obviously gone a little over on the t-shirt on this. I thought it was fun. You connect this to this to this, and now you've got like haptic feedback suits. You got robot suits that you can fly around in. Match that to virtual reality, right? So now you just put on a couple patches and you just do stuff as you would, and you can do it in your virtual spaces. So I don't know.
Let me pivot really quick to another news story. Since here's my pivot. You mentioned Pacific Rim. You're talking about movies, so I'm going to pivot over to Prime Video, because they have their X-ray feature, which I've used from time to time. It's like almost by accident. I forget it's there, and it'll pop up and tell you about who's in the scene, which actually is really helpful, because sometimes my wife and I will be watching something. I'll be like, where do we know her from? Like, you just have that thought, like, what else is she in? What else do we like that actress is in or whatever? And X-ray can help with that. Well, now they're rolling out more AI functionality to it with Summaries. Let's not forget that Amazon owns MGM Studios. So any original series, this will come out on first. I will tell you that it's not on Amazon, but as an example, on Netflix, the series The Diplomat with Kerry Russell in it just came back, and my wife and I love that series. That first season that came out is really, really well done, but it's been forever. And so they have the recap on there, and God help us if my wife and I missed the recap, because we would have no idea what was going on the show. Or I just saw Jyunmi that The Mandalorian, they just okay, I don't know when the last Mandalorian season was off, but it was a while ago as it was. And I just literally read that they're just wrapping some whatchamacallit, filming, and it'll come out in May of 2026. Let me tell you how much I'm going to remember from the Mandalorian story in May of 2026. So anyway, my whole point to this is Amazon has said, hey, we're going to have this new sort of AI feature. I think it might be text, but hopefully it's just voice. And you can say, hey, catch me up on the last episode. It even says it'll go in and look at specific scenes, which if you think about it is actually really cool. If I'm watching from my couch and I can just use my Apple remote and ask a natural language question right to Amazon Video that says, when I pause and it says, I don't know if we can do this yet, but this is where my brain goes. And I go, wait, hold on. When did they meet? When did these two characters meet last? And if it's smart enough to come back and say, in episode 3, these two characters met for the first time, and this is like a 1-paragraph synopsis of that while I'm in the middle of the show, I am the user for that. You know what I mean? That sounds amazing to me. I think it's a great use of AI LLMs. And so I don't know what the full extent of this will be with Prime Video, but I would imagine we will see something similar with your Netflixes, Disney Pluses, and all the others very soon. So I think it's super cool.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a fantastic feature, especially because there seems to be more and more time between seasons of shows.
Years.
Yeah, and I think the next step beyond the text or reading it back to you or anything is like, why don't you compile a recap trailer for me?
Sure. Yeah.
You know, it's like you have the video, you know where it is in the video, just chop it up and put it back. It's like, oh yeah, 30-second recap of season 3. Boom.
You know what that needs to be, Jyunmi? Because my wife and I would need 2 different recaps. My recap would be like, first, it's like, it would be the Beth scenario to this, which is going to ask me questions and interview me first. And mine would be like, do you remember this character? Me? No. Do you remember when they did this? No. Do you remember when they did this? No, I have no clue, sir. You know, that it goes, okay. And then it makes me like a 7-minute recap video. My wife's would be the opposite. She'd be like, yeah, I definitely remember that. Yeah, I remember that. No, I don't remember that as well. Hers would be a 30-second recap because that's all she needs. She is literally my recap engine sitting next to me on the couch, telling me all the things that I've clearly forgotten about the show that we're watching together because too much time has gone by or whatever. So yes, they need to be highly personalized to the person because my answer to all the questions would be like, no, I do not remember that. And then you got to lean into the mic. No, I do not remember that, Senator, on what happened in episode 3. It's my official statement. Okay.
Well, that's a great way to end the news show, unless anyone has any very pressing news that they want to cover.
Just one last one. And I think this is just something to think about, kind of not really connected to the Perplexity thing, but Sundar Pichai from Google says that more than a quarter of the company's new code is created by AI. So that's, to me, very interesting in what practicing what you preach and how that company, I'm curious going forward, what that means for actually labor inside that company, inside Google, and then what they can do more. So if they've already said a quarter of the new code is created by AI, you'd have to imagine that would just get to 50% to 75% in the next year, 2, 3 years, right?
Well, I'd be interested if that gives them faster turnarounds.
Yes.
You know, not just a matter of, labor, but how quickly can they turn around features and things like that.
And that's going to be a reason, right? That's going to be the reason that studios use to take some AI shortcuts, because it's going to be able to be a faster turnaround. I don't have another story, but I do want to say, if you were laughing and inspired by Brian's discussion of how his wife performs AI recaps for you, tomorrow's show is also inspired by Brian on its conversation and actual use case on how you can use AI to prepare for discussions and also make great decisions. So please come back for that. And Friday, we're going to do a deep dive into AI search, because ChatGPT added search, and that's definitely a story, but it's more appropriate as a show.
And if I could just add to that really quick, you should join and subscribe to the newsletter. And the reason is because if you want to see what turned out to be a slightly dark comic about the 25% Google code, I did not intend it to go that way. But even after I created the comic in there, I thought, ooh, that got dark quick. That took a turn. So if you want to see that kind of information that's above and beyond the show, you need to subscribe to the newsletter. You can do that at thedailyashow.com. Okay, that's it for me. That's my...
All right. Well, thank you, everybody in chat and our viewers for joining us today. And yes, please come back Thursday and Friday and, every day. That'd be great. And watch us on the weekend and take the newsletter and on all of those fun things. We love seeing you, hearing you. And so until tomorrow, I think that's it. Bye.